So today I'm going to talk about detecting and mitigating fraud at Airbnb. My name is Anish. I'm a team lead at Trust and Safety team in Airbnb. I'm there for about 16 months. This talk is mostly about how we leverage big data to, to train machine learning models and then use that to stop fraud. How many of you know what Airbnb is? Yeah, so if you don't know, it's a marketplace that connects guests and hosts. You can go and put your room on Airbnb for others to book it, and guests can find it and you can get some nice money, and you also get a personal connection with guests or hosts. At Airbnb, our mission is to make you belong anywhere in the world. You can just find any place at any place in the world, and you should be able to book it. But to make that possible, trust and safety plays a very important role. You can't just trust anybody to go and stay in their home. So the way that we communicate, the way that we detect fraud, the way that we detect bad people from the platform plays a very important role in making Airbnb the most trusted place. Our group is mostly consisted of two main orgs, product and operations. Product is all the engineering, data science, and product managers, where we design things that you see on the site. And ops is like people who go through things that have already happened and try to detect if there is something that we can do to stop it. They identify features, they talk to us, they go through manual reviews if we flag something as bad. So today I'm going to talk about what are the types of fraud that we see on Airbnb. We use machine learning to stop that. Most of you might not know really machine learning so well, so I'll just touch upon some basics on what machine learning is. And then I'll talk about how we apply machine learning at Airbnb to stop fraud. Then I will talk a little bit about what are the types of organizational things that we have seen have worked best for us, and probably if you should consider if you are trying to build a machine learning oriented organization in your company, and about some future next steps. So what are the types of fraud that we see on Airbnb? Turns out it's pretty industry standard. Most other companies in online world will be seeing the same fraud attacks. First one is payment fraud. Like people who are trying to book something on Airbnb with a stolen credit card. Ultimately, we get charged. We call this as chargeback fraud. So you steal someone's credit card and you book on Airbnb. We let the transaction go through. After some time, the original owner of the card will dispute the charge, and Airbnb has to pay back that money. So it's an impact on Airbnb. We call that as chargeback fraud. Second thing is fake listings. Anyone can create any listing on Airbnb. Turns out some people try to create bad listings. An example could be like, hey, I have a room on Mars, come and stay in there, which doesn't make sense, but people actually fall for that sometimes. Another thing could be spam messages, like you getting messages from unsolicited people for all advertisement type things. Hey, like we just opened a new restaurant in San Francisco, so like you should come and stop by, which doesn't make any sense, but people actually try to do that. And another one could be account hijackings. People steal your username and password from other services somewhere else, and then they have these password banks, and your password might get leaked somewhere, and then people try to use their account with your credentials, which is all pretty standard across all companies. But we just have like all these. Since we are a marketplace, we have frauds on all these like different vectors. We are just not payments company. We are like a community company, so we have all these extra things that we have to consider. To stop these frauds, we have a bunch of machine learning models on our end, probably up to like 7 or 8 different types of machine learning models. But one thing is, we are very sensitive about what type of things that we do to mitigate fraud. Our concern is that if we reveal too much information, bad actors will come to know of that, and they can morph their attack to do something else. So we are really very sensitive about that. That's why today, instead of going to talk about a real fraud, I'm going to take an example of a fictional fraud, which is a very cute one. So Toki is our dog team's mascot. He's one of our teammates' dog, Justin's dog. He comes to office every day, and Justin created a profile for Toki on Airbnb to browse around the site, to enjoy all the nice listings on the platform. Toki spent some time every day, and slowly he developed a fascination for castles. He really started loving castles, and he wants to stay in one of those castles. Soon, he started trying to book all the castles that he can find, but the only problem is he doesn't know Justin's credit card number. and the only number that he knows of is Bobo, so he tries entering that. And we obviously stopped the fraud, but soon we started figuring out that many puppies in the world are trying to book castles on Airbnb. So this is some sort of like serious fraud attack vector that we have to stop now. So the talk is mostly going to about how we can detect a puppy detection model today to stop puppies from booking on Airbnb. So before we jump into that, let's take a step back to understand what machine learning models are, to get some basics covered so that we can follow rest of the talk if you are pretty rusty on machine learning basics. Machine learning is science of getting computers to act without being explicitly programmed. This is from Wikipedia. Basically, this means you take some past data and then you train a machine learning model to predict something in the future. An example is, this is a simple example. So we are trying to predict if it's going to rain tomorrow. For that, we need a bunch of features. If example feature can be, is it going to be cloudy? Based on the value of that feature, we make a prediction. If it's going to be rainy, if it's going to be cloudy tomorrow, then it's going to rain. If it's not cloudy, then it's not going to rain. So that's a prediction that we are making here. To make that prediction, we need a bunch of ground truth data. The bottom part that you see here, all the features and labels, those are the past data that we have seen. From all the data samples we have, we collect what are the features that make sense. In this case, being cloudy is the thing that makes sense. And what is the label of that outcome? What is the label of prediction? Whether basically rain or no rain. So we train a model based on this ground truth data, and then we send it through the model pipeline of getting all the feature values and then making a prediction. This is basically a very simple ML model in making a prediction. Once you get that idea, before you start to develop a machine learning model pipeline to detect something bad, you need to get some basics right. You need to understand what is the delay tolerance of your ML model. If your model takes a few days to detect some outcome, is it okay for you? Or does it really need so much of computational expensive power? Or do you want it to be in real time? Do you want it to take a few milliseconds to detect something, to predict some outcome? Once you get that thing done, then there are very popular machine learning models outside, like pretty much open source everywhere, you can find them. Support vector state machines, neural networks, random forest classifiers, even regression classifiers or Bayesian classifiers. You can pick one of them, but you need to know what is the right model for your use case. Usually, it turns out you need to experiment with few models based on some basic understanding you have to know what is the right model. In case of Airbnb, we tried few and then we realized that random forest classifiers work best for us. We have like 8 different models. Using a different model type for each model doesn't make much of a sense for us to maintain. So we chose and stuck to random forest classifier that is working best for us so far. So once you detect something as bad, how will you mitigate that? Do you send it for manual review, like meaning for ops or people to actually look at the thing and then decide if it's bad or not? So machine learning model, the model is not always right. It can predict things, but it can't say whether it's right or not. So you still need some sort of another eye on the outcome. Or you can actually throw some friction on the user, like probably captcha. If you see that people are trying to if you see that somebody's creating so many accounts from a IP, the ML model predicts something is going bad here. You can either let them create the accounts and then send it for manual review later, or you can throw a friction right away at the user to prove that they are a real human. This is where real-time friction comes into play. Or sometimes instead of even throwing friction, you might just collect more information from user, like just seeking extra information. Like you are usually logging from San Francisco, but if you're logging from Beijing, I'm a bit suspicious about you. Like how did you travel to Beijing within few hours? So I can ask more information from you to prove that you are the same person. Yeah, so in summary, this is how it looks like. You have some past labels and past features. You do some model training on that, and you get your model out. Once you have the model, you put it in a service or some sort of big infrastructure around that to get your outcomes. So once you have that done, I'm going to talk a bit about how we do machine learning at Airbnb. Our ML pipeline contains of 3 main core components: signal service, model service, and model builder. Signal service is a service that obviously takes a bunch of input data and then gives out a value of a bunch of feature values. Like for example, if my puppy model needs, let's say, a guest name, you can just specify that, and then the signal service will give you the feature value in the current for the current user. I'll dig more into each of these components, but hold on with me. The second one is model service. This is where we keep our models, and then we make calls against that service to get the values, passing it a bunch of features, and I want an outcome out of that. The third one is model builder. This is how we train our models. How do we send all the features that it needs? How do we send all the ground truth data and then get a model out of it? Jumping into signal service, this is a service that takes in a bunch of feature names and gives out a feature value set. It is mostly configuration driven. I will show you what that means. Basically, it's just some sort of config where you don't need to know how to code to know what features are being sent into the model. You just need to so that this way any ops people or anyone in the company can take a look at for example, puppy detection model and then see what features that are we using to detect puppies. The second one is collects data uniformly, meaning the feature values can be stored in various sorts of data stores. Could be production databases like MySQL, or could be Hive or Hadoop, or it could even be third-party service or even external service. So it has to provide some sort of unified interface to get a signal from anywhere without the caller being worried about where it is calling the feature from. And it also forms some sort of graph-based dependency thing, which I'll show you in a bit. It knows how to get a given feature value based on whatever you just pass it. Coming to our puppy detection model, we need some sort of features to identify if it's a puppy. Some things that stood out for us while we went through all the puppy reservations in the past were puppies are all using hi humans in their profile, so that's one feature that we care about. And they're also trying to use Bobo in the credit card numbers. That's another feature. And they have already made some casual bookings in the past. So these are the three features that we care about the most in puppy detection model. So let's see how we can get these three features. Using signal service, this is the API called a signal service. We just pass in the inputs that we have. In this case, we just have a reservation ID. So we pass in the reservation ID, and we're asking for all these other signals, meaning for this reservation, does the guest of this reservation contains hi humans in the profile name, in the profile description, or if the credit card contains Bobo, or if this reservation's guest already made some bookings in the past with casuals. So I'm just saying hey, this is the reservation, and I want you to give me these features. It's up to signal service to figure out how to get those feature values back to me. Signal service contains a dependency graph of itself, which is written by engineers once in a lifetime. It's pretty huge. I'm just showing a small piece of it. This is a small subsection containing a small piece of it. So these are the features, the ones highlighted in yellow color, are the features that I'm asking for right now. I'm asking if the guest description contains Bow, or if it contains hi humans, or how many casuals are booked in the past. Looking at this graph, the left side of the graph are the inputs, and the right side are the outcomes, the outputs that we care about, the output signals that we care about. Each arrow indicates a dependency, meaning the credit card number is dependent on getting the reservation ID. So once we have reservation ID, then we can try to ask for a credit card number. And once we have the credit card number, then I can check if it contains a Bob in the credit card number. Similarly, once I have a reservation ID, then I can make another call to get guest ID. Once I have a guest ID, then I can make another call to get guest description and reservations of this guest. You can see that obviously host ID and host age are not needed for our features requested right now. So we can safely remove them from the graph. So this is the graph that we are left with. Once we have this thing, the way that we extract features are, we classify them into two categories, synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous features are the ones that we can compute within the request cycle or within few microseconds. They are mostly math-based computations. Given a string and asking if it contains a word bow, this is a math-based computation which can just be done on the same process. Whereas asynchronous signals are the ones that needs input from third-party services. It could be a DB or could be a network call, could be anything. In this case, getting credit card number from a given reservation, that needs a DB call, that needs a DB lookup. So that's an asynchronous signal that takes a while to get computed. That probably takes few milliseconds. So if you are computing all these things in with a similar way, these synchronous and asynchronous, then you are losing some advantage there, because the order of magnitude of computations is really different from these two. So we compute all the asynchronous signals in a batch because that needs a network. In each wave, we determine what are the asynchronous signals that we need, and we make a one API request call to get all of them in one batch. I'll talk what that means. For example, we can see that credit card, guest ID, they all are asynchronous. Once we have a guest ID, we need to know guest description, and then from that, we can get reservations. So they all are like dependent on third-party DB calls. So in batch one, we get the reservation ID, which is passed in the request. This is synchronous. Once we have that, we make another batch call asking for both credit card and guest ID to the DB. We just do them parallelly, and then they all are done in one shot. Now, once we have that, we make another batch call for the synchronous of checking if the credit card number contains BOW. Then in batch 4, we compute all the guest description and reservations of the current guest ID. Then in batch 5, it's another asynchronous call, to check if it contains humans or also the number of casuals booked. We can see that here we actually just made 2 batch calls of asynchronous requests, whereas in the normal way we could have made 4 asynchronous calls one by one. That way it's much more faster in resolving dependencies and doing things in parallel. Usually in machine learning model pipelines, feature computation is the most hard part. That is the one that you spend most of your latency time in getting all these features from various places. So the signal service really helped us in moving that much faster. Yeah, so once we have these features, values read from DB or third-party services, we have all these values. Now we call a model service with passing all this bunch of feature values. In our case, we are using a PMML-based random forests. PMML stands for predictive model markup language. It's XML-based format. This is pretty standard across like various services if you want to use your model as a service. Basically, that means I can develop a machine learning model on my machine, and I can generate a PMML file. And this model is standard. Anyone can use the same model. It's not language dependent or anything. As long as somebody can understand how to read PMML, I can just translate this model to somebody else's computer or some server, and then I can run it as a third-party service. This provides HTTP interface. We use open source tool called Open Scoring. It's widely available. We made some modifications to that internally. We use that to make requests to this PMML model. And also another thing that we added support for is we make multiple calls to various models within the same action. Like for example, let's say this is our model service. The first layer is a service. The second layer contains the action that user is requesting for. In this case, we are asking about reservation requests. In this action, we are actually calling 2 models in one shot: puppy detection and chargeback. We are asking these 2 models. Usually, people do it in a non-parallel way. They call one model first, get the response back, and then call another model. But using open scoring model is allowing us to do these things in parallel. Once we have the output from machine learning model, we can decide what to do. But the core part of it is how do you compute or how do you calculate the model? How do you train your model? There are few things that we do here. First thing is signal service, as soon as it computes values for the set of features, it also puts them on HDFS, like Hadoop file system, or basically Hive. And when we detect something is suspicious, we also send it for manual review for agents, ops agents. Ops agents will manually go through that, and then they mark things as being bad or good. We have these labels from ops, and we have the feature values from signal service. So we clip those 2, we dump those 2 on HDFS or Hive, and then we do some sort of table transformations and training data set over there to merge these 2 and then train our model. This is how it looks like in summary overall. The fraud prediction service that you see on the left side is the main entry point to this entire fraud detection mechanism. User requests hit that service, and that service first calls signal service, asking it for the current input that it has. Like, hey, this is the action that I'm predicting, and these are the features that I need, and this is the input for this action. Then the signal service will compute all the feature values by either talking to DB. In this case, it's just getting all the features from production database, but it could also be talking to third-party services or even external services. Once it gets the values, it dumps them all onto HDFS or Hadoop file system. This is like, we have like few terabytes of data there. It all goes there. Once it dumps that, it returns back the values to fraud prediction service. And fraud prediction again passes these feature values to model service, asking it, hey, this is a model name that I want to run, and these are the feature values. Give me the fraud score. The model will give back the score to the fraud prediction service. And if the score is somewhat looking suspicious, like let's say on a scale of 0 to 1, if the score is like 0.8, meaning it's pretty fraudulent, we put it in a queue, like for manual review. For manual review, we have our entire ops organization. They go through the queue entries every day. They see, hey, this looks suspicious, so mark it as bad. This looks okay, so mark it as good. All these labels will again go back into production database. From there, in a nightly job, they all go into HDFS again. So we have these features from Signal Service, and we have all the labels from production database on our Hadoop, on our HDFS. Every night, we do some sort of training. We retrain our models based on clubbing these two features and labels. We generate new models, or those PMML-based files. We again upload those models onto model service, and the cycle continues. Basically, fraud version makes another call again, and then using this updated models every day. We don't exactly do model training every day. We do it like probably every week. It's a pretty long process at this time. Looking into how this model looks like internally, we use random forest classifier. Random forest classifier is basically a bunch of decision trees. It's like a forest of trees. Each decision tree containing, it only knows its features, and across the organization, they arrive at a conclusion. So for a puppet detection model, let's say one feature value is if the description is using hi humans in the profile. If it is yes, in our case, yes, Toki is using a hi human in the profile. Then we check if the reservation is using Bobo in the credit card number. Yes, in our case, Toki is using Bobo in the credit card number. So we determine that it's a bad request, or it's a bad action. We log that. Overall, we have a bunch of such decision trees. When we train, we specify the number of decision trees that we want in the random forest classifier. We usually say up to like 1,000 or so. And each of these trees are, during training phase, they all get formed based on the data, the validation data that they're passing to it. They self-organize themselves into it. It's mostly like a black box to us. We don't care about like what exactly are the nodes and what exactly are the edges in the graph. We just see that the entire outcome is making sense to us. So let's say we have a 4 decision tree based random forest classifier here. And when you pass these inputs, each one of them makes a decision, each tree. In this case, 3 trees decided bad and 1 tree decided good. So the score of this entire model is 75% bad. So basically, the score translates to 0.75. And it ultimately is a bad decision. So we just say, it's a good decision in terms of like say predicting that it's a bad value. That's how we detect something is bad, and then we stop the action. That's how we say, hey, like go away, Toki, you don't belong to the platform. Poor puppy has to find somewhere else. No. Okay, so that is mostly about the technical side of things. But we realized that it's just not about, it doesn't matter how much of a sophisticated model you have. What matters is mostly the collaboration across teams that ultimately helps you in moving much faster in detecting fraud or stopping fraud. As I said earlier, we have main 3 teams at play here. Operations team, which are the people who actually go through all the flagged items on the site. And data science team, these guys build models, they train models, and then they give us the models. And engineering team, which takes care of all the mitigation steps that are needed once something is flagged as suspicious. It usually starts in this form of cycle. Everything starts with understanding what you are trying to solve first. Once you have that understanding, you identify what features make sense in stopping this thing. Let's say you know that you are trying to stop puppies. Now you have to understand what are the features that make sense in identifying puppies discriminately. If you say something like, is user logging in from San Francisco as a feature for puppy detection, that doesn't make any sense, and that actually pollutes your data. That gives a bad model, bad output, bad input. So once you have that, you understand your features, you train the models by picking those features from the past labels. And then during request cycle, you score the events. Once you identify something as bad, you find ways to mitigate that. It could be either throwing friction at user, or it could be putting it from manual review and then cleaning up the mess later by manual agents. That's what reviewing is about. Once agents keep reviewing things, they identify more attacks, more fraudulent vectors that they're seeing recently, and then you again come back to identifying more features for that. So the shorter the cycle is, the faster you can move as an organization in keeping your models like up to date. Yeah. So the future of things, so far we are mostly focused on getting our models to shit and working together. In future we already started steps on working on some of these things, but mostly we want to get our models working in real time really fast. Right now it's a few milliseconds, but we are trying to get that to much more closer cycle so that we can detect things right away when user is still on the site. And clustering. Machine learning can only help you if you know what you are looking for. You know that puppies are making reservations on the platform, and you will look for ways to stop that. But clustering is a way that you can group activities on the site, and you can just look at a pattern to see if there is anything that stands out from the group. Basically, if you group all the reservations happening on the site by species, probably puppies might stand out, which shouldn't be a group in there at all. So clustering helps you in identifying those things. And anomaly detection. Once a user is on Airbnb, you know, like a good user follows this path of like searching and then booking and then doing something. But if anybody else is doing something in a very different way, not following the standard procedure, that's something that's a bit sketchy. So you need to do something about that. You first need to identify that, and then you can do something to stop that. And automation. Right now our machine learning pipeline is still somewhat manual. Basically, you identify features and then you manually train that. We are actually thinking of ways to automate this entire thing. So every day night, I just run a command and then that generates new models for me every day. I don't have to do anything about that. That's pretty rad. We are getting close to doing that. And another thing is more data sources. One thing for machine learning model is the way that you identify features. Right now, we are still identifying like what are the external things that what are the external third-party providers that we can talk to get more signals into actions. That's something that keeps us busy. Cool, yeah, so that's the end of my talk. If you have any questions, we should talk right now. Yeah.
So for the model training, you guys write all the training steps, or you use some like package like Spark?
Yeah, we use Spikeit for that, but we still need to compute all the features that are needed for that. So we have some sort of Hive transformations every day that generates these big tables, and then we use Scikit to use these features and then generate more PMML-based models.
Which one you are using?
Scikit actually.
Scikit-learn?
Yeah, for Python based.
Hi, it's Ramesh. You mentioned some things are written by humans one time, like the signal service kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to delineate between what humans are doing one time versus what is the machine learning. So where's that boundary? Because it seems like I want to know basically in the absence of humans what this thing can do, kind of a thing, versus how much is it dependent on humans?
Yeah.
Program.
So you need humans in two areas here. One is to identify identify how to generate a given feature. Like, let's say you say that for puppy detection model, I know that just saying hi humans in the profile is a feature that I care about, but how do you derive that feature? That's where you need engineers to code up that thing. And second thing that you need humans is in identifying the suspicious activities that have already happened and then forming these ground truth data or applying labels on this past data to retrain the model. So when you retrain the model, you don't really specify how each branch in decision tree should weigh or what features that should go into decision tree. The model automatically picks it up.
It automatically does that.
Yeah.
But the weighing is done automatically by the machine.
By the model, exactly. You just say, hey, this is my features and this is the data. You give a row of features and then you give a value. You give a bunch of such outcomes, like 1,000 outcomes. The model will form itself so that for this 1,000 predictions, it can always give out those values. If you pass them again, the model will give out the same values.
And then based on that, it can do future kind of thing.
Exactly.
Got it.
We want to protect that doggy. What are your safety use cases, and how does machine learning apply to that? Because that was a fraud use case.
Yep. For safety, we are very sensitive about that, but we still don't really have a sophisticated machine learning model for that yet. The instance of safety concerns on Airbnb were actually very small. We are not at a scale where we can actually build a machine learning model out of that. To build a ML model, you need a bunch of data to train the model. But the instances are really very small. There is like not enough data to even build a model. In those cases, we actually fall back to rule-based models, basically identifying, hey, basically we ourselves like coding up those machine learning rules, saying, hey, if this is the case, if this is the case, if this is the case, then do this. We code it up in the code base to identify such fraudulent behavior, but it's not machine learning model based.
You talked about having other data sources. What would be some examples of the other data sources you would bring online?
Right now, we are using a bunch of third-party services like Swift Science, or if you know those guys. They give some sort of signal based on the user's past behavior on the site. They tell you if this action is in line with users' previous actions on the site. So some sort of extra signal to those list of features that we already have.
You mentioned you wanted to get things done faster, so it means you're not going as fast as you want from a computation perspective right
Yeah.
now. So can you explain a little bit about what is your current platform, et cetera, and what you're doing to get it faster?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we have about 200 features per each model. If we are doing all of those calls in DB database, we have to make like at least 50 such requests, and each DB call takes about 10 milliseconds at least. When you're making 50 such requests, we are talking about 500 milliseconds, which is a very good amount of latency in our case. Our site's response time is within like 200 milliseconds. So if we can get something done within 40 milliseconds or 30 milliseconds, then we can afford to do these things in request cycle. So to avoid that, we are trying towards more of a cache-based approach. So instead of making DB calls on the fly every time, we make some sort of nightly computation of all the features that we care about, all the values that we care about. We put them on a HBase type file system, and then during daytime there is this thing called Lambda architecture. If you're interested, you can read more about that. So it's a combination of nightly jobs plus daytime updates on the cache key. We use that to actually get those values in like 1 millisecond or so time response. But we are still a bit far from doing that. We are doing that right now as I speak. Yeah, we have about 1 million hosts or 1 million rooms on the site, more than 1 million actually. And we have many more millions of users. And we certainly generate like few terabytes of data every day. I don't know the exact details. But all of our tables, like basically all the feature tables that we have, they all are few, like 50 terabytes or so. Especially our message tables are pretty huge.